Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton. How you doing? Just a little intro today because I have a request. This podcast has been, thus far, a real labor of love, and we have loved doing it, and we hope that you love listening. And to continue the podcast, we could use a little bit of help. So I have two things, actually, we need help with. The first is financial. If you get benefit from this podcast and you'd like to contribute $1 or $2 a month or more, there is a way to do that. If you go to ketolifesupport.com, there will be a Patreon link to my Patreon page, The Ketonist, where you can just give us a little tip, or you can sign up for a larger amount where you get benefit back beyond just knowing that you're a good person. And you're a good person whether you give us money or not, I promise. But if you want to keep the wheels on this particular bus, we'd love it if you could go and do that. And the second request is non-financial, which is if there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, whether that is from me or Ken Berry or Neisha Berry, who is coming back, by the way. Baby Barry can't talk yet, so he will not be guest starring, but maybe in the future. And, or Carrie Brown, or maybe there's somebody you'd like to hear us talk to, that's not in that list thus far. If you have topics that you want us to address on this show, tell us about it. You can do that. The best place to do it is actually on our Facebook page. Yes, we have a Facebook page. We actually have a Facebook group. It's a group, not a page. Sorry. But you can find that link again at ketolifesupport.com. And in that group, just let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. So thank you so much for listening to my requests. And I will get this show started now. So stay tuned for the actual show. Hi, welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton from theketonist.com, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we have a doctor in the house, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check with a trusted medical professional about your personal medical concerns. Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton, and today I'm bringing to you an episode that was actually a live video that Dr. Ken Berry and I recorded when I visited him last month. We talked about my thyroid story, which we have talked about in the past, but I have to say, I think this one is better. I think we went into more detail. It paints a clearer picture, and it really goes into the details of what people should know about hypothyroidism and kind of the epidemic of misdiagnosis and underdiagnosis of this condition, and what that can look like for people and what that could mean for their life. And so it's a personal episode, goes into my story a lot, but also gives some good medical information. Now, in recent days, the coronavirus situation in the United States has gotten quite intense. We discuss nothing about that in this audio, which was a video, but you're listening to the audio portion. Because it was not a thing yet. It was a thing that was happening very far away and in places we weren't talking about. Hello.
Hi. This is not Neisha Loves It.
No.
This is Kim Howerton, and we're on her Facebook, her Instagram, and my Instagram. And tonight we're going to be talking about the thyroid. Not all things thyroid. We're not going to be talking about thyroid cancer or hyperthyroidism, but we are going to be beating to death.
By the way, we didn't put in our ear pods. Do we care?
No, we don't.
Okay, we don't care.
Yeah, we don't care. We have pretty good acoustics here. Usually.
Okay.
Can everybody hear us okay? Give us a thumb or a smiley face if you can hear us okay. I think it should be fine.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about low thyroid, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, what you should know, what you should check, what you should do, and very common, I think the dog's outside, very common mistakes that healthcare providers make. I used to make them back in the day, and things that you can say respectfully and lovingly to your healthcare provider to get them to do what you need done so that you can have your best metabolism and your best health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I am not a doctor. Hey, if you're new to me, well, nice to meet you. But I'm not a doctor, but I am a good friend of Dr. Berry's. I am a keto coach. And I'm somebody who suffered from pretty significant thyroid issues for a long time.
For years.
Decades.
Now, and so this is important. First of all, if you want to, I want you to tell your story about just your journey with bumbling around with your thyroid until it finally got diagnosed. And now finally, not too long in the distant past, it's been treated somewhat properly.
Yeah.
And so and so many of you, men and women, are going to hear your story in Kim's words, and that's how you know you're on the right track and you're listening to the right people. So I'm going to let the dog in while you tell your story.
Sounds good. It's the joy of living with pets. So, it turns out, in hindsight, that my story with hypothyroidism probably started in my early teens. So I experienced, I was one of those kids with like a full head of thick hair and, fairly normal in a lot of ways. But by the time I ended up, about the time puberty set in, sort of on that journey, things started to happen, like my hair started to fall out. And at the time I didn't have any idea what was causing it. And I had enough left that it wasn't something that I was, as a teenager, gonna tell a doctor about, because when you're a teenager, as long as you're not actually bald, you don't know that there's really a problem. But I was having a lot of problems with energy levels. I was having a lot of problem with pretty serious bouts of depression. And I was having a lot of problems with weight gain. So all of that was happening for
every single thing you just said is a low thyroid or hypothyroid symptom.
Yeah.
Every single one, without exception. And you were initially diagnosed with clinical depression.
Yeah,
fairly young.
When I was 9.
Yeah, so I would opine that you were already having thyroid issues at 9.
Yeah.
Because unless a 9-year-old has experienced extremely traumatic losses, they're not going to have clinical depression unless they're in an abusive environment, just a terrible environment. 9-year-olds always find the sunny side of everything. They just do, right? And so, in my opinion, that's probably when it first started.
And how I was diagnosed with clinical depression was starting from about 9. And I was an early mature. So when I said I started puberty, that was at like 9 and 10. So it was right in that time frame. I was already like 5'4" at that point, and I would just come home from school and just cry. I couldn't manage my mood. I was in a loving home. I was not abused. My parents were wonderful. Like, everything was fine. And I just couldn't feel like life was okay. And that's about the time that I started to compulsively overeat, because it was sort of the only way I could figure out to self-medicate the way that I felt.
Because it works. It makes you feel better temporarily.
Yeah. And so fast forward to college, when I still am having a lot of mood disorder issues. The weight gain is still happening. I'm still struggling. I start losing more hair, part of my eyebrows. And I actually started thinking maybe I'm bipolar, because no medication helped.
Yeah. So
not a one.
Any healthcare providers who may be watching this, either live or on a replay, if you see a 9-year-old who's depressed and they're in a wonderful, loving home, your spidey sense should immediately start tingling. Something physiological here is going on. This person does not have a serotonin deficiency. This person does not have a Zoloft or a Prozac deficiency. That's not what they have. There's something going on with their biochemistry, with their physiology, that needs to be addressed. And the number one place to look in a young lady who started puberty is hormones, and that includes thyroid hormones.
Yeah. And so, interestingly, in college, when the doctors started saying, well, you must be bipolar then, because apparently depression meds don't work on bipolar people. And
so we're 8 or 9 years in.
We are now like 8 or 9 years in.
To piddling around, bumping around. How many different medications for depression and other things?
I had been on about 6 different medications, one of which made me gain 40 pounds in about 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Which one was that?
I don't remember.
I wish you could. Because I would call that one out in a second, because some of the antidepressants are notorious for making you just pack on the fat.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'd already been struggling my whole teen years with being probably about 30 pounds more than I wanted to, which when you're a teenager feels like you are morbidly obese.
That's 1,000 pounds too much.
Right.
Yeah.
And so gaining that much weight in college was really also kind of devastating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so anyway, but there was one doctor that I went to, and he said, so it'd be interesting. Some depression and cases like this show up as they're a thyroid problem. He mentioned it. Yep. And he sent me in to get tested. And he said, oh, your numbers aren't that low. So he probably like a couple years later, I would have gotten properly treated, but he wasn't quite where he needed to be on his journey.
Do you have a copy of that? Do you know what the numbers were? Yeah. Because, that would be interesting too.
Yeah, he just said, well, actually, I should say, they were low one test. He said, let's send you back in to confirm. And the second test, they were normal.
Barely within, I bet. Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, I don't think it's your thyroid.
Yeah, yeah. And so you almost caught it at 19, 20.
21, yeah.
21, but then you didn't.
Yeah.
And so you got to suffer some more.
So then they put me on bipolar medicine for a while.
Yeah, but that was fun.
That was super fun. Didn't do a thing.
Didn't help at all.
Not at all. Now, it's not totally unreasonable. I do have several bipolar people in my family. But at no point in any of my depression diagnoses did anyone send me for blood labs, except for that thyroid part that didn't go anywhere.
And so anybody watching, if you've been diagnosed with depression or bipolar, and your doctor has not checked a good, complete, thorough panel of blood work and urine in the making of that diagnosis, you have not been properly diagnosed. Let me say that again, because that's very important.
It's a big deal.
If you are ever diagnosed with any psychiatric condition, all of them, any of them, and you have not had blood work checked, if they're just like, well, it sounds like you're depressed, here's some Prozac, or here's some Paxil, completely inappropriate, borderline malpractice. This lady suffered for decades, but at the hands of at least thyroid incompetent doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've been diagnosed with depression or anxiety or OCD or bipolar and you've not had lab work checked, go back to your doctor immediately and say, aren't they diagnoses of exclusion? Don't you have to eliminate thyroid and adrenal and all kinds of things, brain tumors even, before you can just say, oh, you have clinical depression? And your doctor will go, well, and then then they'll check your blood, because it happens very commonly. And
I was in the way that my moods through life were up and down. So I got out of the 9-year-old couldn't stop crying all day long. And then had a couple years where I just sort of wasn't that enthusiastic about anything, but I was okay. I managed. And then it was kind of that on and off pattern through college. I did pretty well for 2 years of college. And then 1 year of college, I had to take a couple quarters off because it was just too much stress. Like, I did well in school. I didn't actually find school hard. It was just being alive was hard.
Just being you.
Yeah. And so by the time so that's my 20s. Into my 20s, I continued to kind of gain weight through my 20s, working a sedentary job, not knowing about keto yet. And then as I got into my 30s, by the way, I hit the 200s in college in terms of weight and never turned around until very recently.
Yeah.
But then by the time I hit my 30s, everything accelerated.
Yeah.
So the weight gain accelerated, feeling out of control, hormonally accelerated, my mood decelerated. Everything just felt like a crisis, and I felt like I was losing my mind.
Yeah, and you were.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because of your brain.
Yeah.
It was because of your thyroid.
Yeah.
And so how did you finally
That's a good question.
fumble and bumble around and get diagnosed?
So I'm now like late 30s at this point, guys. I've lived over half my life not okay. And like humans are amazing.
Yeah.
You can be pretty messed up and just soldier on.
Yes.
But it was getting to the point where I was like, a bus would be nice. Like, just let's take me out. I don't want to make any efforts towards that, but if it happens, good deal. We have puppies. So in my late 30s though, quite honestly, as a lot of these things happen, I started gaining weight at a really rapid pace. And now I was compulsively eating to try and manage my mood.
Sure, you're self-soothing.
And that had accelerated, like, to a large degree. And, he's trying to soothe me.
Yes.
And I was like, I have to do something. And I met a woman named Sarah Gottfried, who's a doctor, who said, well, let's get some labs run on you. And she ran a bunch of labs. Finally, for the first time ever, ran all the labs that I needed run. And she said, your thyroid is screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, really?
Okay. And so she started treating me with, I think I started on Tyrosint, which is not very commonly prescribed, and then I think she said it's more popular in Europe. And then some Synthroid. And so she did a little tinkering combo. And suddenly things started to feel quite a bit better. She also put me on what I would call a paleo low-carb diet. So she said that her opinion is that if you have any type of hypothyroidism, I have not hyper, by the way, hypothyroidism, it's probably autoimmune in nature.
Almost always.
And she said that basically grains just were not something I could consume.
100%. If anybody listening, if you have low thyroid or hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's or any of the other thyroiditis, you've got to stop the grains and stop liquid dairy, because almost every human has at least some degree of an autoimmune reaction to that. And for some people, it attacks their joints. Other people, it attacks their gut. Some people, it attacks their thyroid gland, and they wind up with a malfunctioning organ just because of the food they're eating. Grains are not part of the proper human diet. Neither is liquid dairy. The proteins in dairy are way too inflammatory for the average person. And so if you're having any autoimmune condition or hypothyroidism, strongly consider getting rid of all the sugar, the grains, and the industrial seed oils, and the liquid low-fat dairy.
Yeah. And so but I will then say it took years for me to dial in the right medication and the right dosage. Yeah. My parents were like, what is happening? Like, feeling, aren't you feeling better yet? And I was feeling better. Like, improvements were happening, but it was really good that I had a doctor that also explained to me, like, it takes a while to tinker to get you straightened out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How would your life be different if you'd been diagnosed at 11 years of age and treated properly with diet and the thyroid hormone replacement? Do you ever just think about that and want to slap somebody?
I mean, quite honestly, if I really went, like, very deep into the reality of that, I would probably be very sad.
Yeah, or angry.
Both.
Yes.
Both.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But, I mean, basically, my whole life was about doing the best I could. It was sort of like I felt the best way I can describe most of my experience of life is I felt like I was trying to walk on a broken leg.
Yep.
It didn't work really well. It hurt all the time. Things were just screwed up, but I had to go.
And you can soldier on and push through it, but that doesn't mean your leg's okay. It's still broken, and you need to fix the leg, and the leg being an analogy for the thyroid. So if you know anyone who's got any of these symptoms, and you're like, man, that really sounds like my friends or my mom or my sister, please share this video with them, because there's so many doctors just don't know about the test we're about to talk about that you need checked if you have these kinds of symptoms. And so we're going to be talking about that and then taking a lot of your questions. And so if you know someone who has low thyroid or who you suspect has low thyroid, but their doctor said they're fine, please share this video with them however you can get it to them. It'll be on my Instagram, your Instagram, for 24 hours. And then it's on Kim's Facebook page. Tell everybody where they can find you, because I'll bet even your people
don't
know all of the places they can find you. And then my people need to find you. This lady has amazing recipes, and this is where you find her.
Thank you. So on most social media, you can find me at The Ketonist, TheKetonist. On YouTube, I'm Kim Howerton, which is my name. KimHowerton.
Yeah. And you're going to be posting more and more delicious recipes on your YouTube.
Yes, I am.
Coming up in the near future. So if you don't follow her on YouTube, you really need to check that out. Go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell so that when she posts one of her delicious recipes, and I was just enjoying some liver mousse that her and Neisha made, and oh my God, it's good.
So right now there's a salted caramel recipe on my YouTube and soon to be a tortilla recipe. So if you sign up now, you'll get all the updates.
Nice. So let's talk about how you were properly diagnosed. What labs need to be checked? What are typically checked? What needs to be checked? And then what do you do with that?
Right. Because one of the things that we find is most doctors, if you say, can you please check my thyroid? If they don't do it themselves, they will check one, maybe two tests, right?
Yeah. Almost every doctor to check a thyroid is going to check a TSH, or a thyroid stimulating hormone, which is not even a thyroid hormone. It's actually a hormone that's secreted by your anterior pituitary gland in your brain. And so and that's how we were taught. I was taught, you just check a TSH, and if it's fine, the thyroid has to be fine by definition. That is absolutely not true. And so the first time your doctor checked the TSH, it was a little high. He said, "Lou, let's recheck that." And then it was back with, probably my guess, barely within normal limits, but you had every single symptom of hypothyroid. Right. So in order to thoroughly, completely check a thyroid, you need the following. So get ready to write this down. You ready? You need a TSH. Definitely you need that. You need a free T4. That is an actual thyroid hormone. You need a free T3. You need a reverse T3, because there can be problems with converting from T4 to T3. You need a TPO antibody. You need a TG antibody. And what else do you need?
There's one more.
There's one more. What is it? TSH, free T3, free T4, TPO, TG, reverse T3. That's a great start.
Yeah.
If you just got those checked, you're going to find almost every single episode of low thyroid that would have been missed otherwise. Many people will have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and their TSH will still be within normal limits, but they'll have every single symptom of hypothyroid.
Right. And one of the things I found out is in the early stages of Hashimoto's, you actually have that up, down, up, down, up, down. You're not down the whole time. You're up and And a lot of people get diagnosed as bipolar who have Hashis, because that up, down of mood can often be thought of as a mental problem.
Absolutely. And it looks like bipolar if you're just half-assed looking. And so what was basically happening is Kim's immune system would attack her thyroid and beat it down. Then her thyroid would fight back and regenerate. And then and so she was up and down, up and down. And really her ups and downs were, she was normal for a while.
Yeah.
And then she was down for a while.
Right.
But that looks like an up and down, like a bipolar, but it's not.
Right. Because I didn't have the manic high versus the depressed low. I had depressed low versus can function.
Yes. And to a lazy doctor or a doctor who's just not thinking with the proper paradigm, that can look like bipolar, and that can get you some Depakote or some Seroquel when you don't need that at all.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with taking bipolar meds when you are bipolar.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And
some people need Prozac and Zoloft and Paxil. Right. I'm not saying nobody need those.
Right.
But if you've been misdiagnosed with depression, when what you really have is hypothyroidism, none of that's going to help you at all. And every single pill you put in your mouth has about a 2 or a 3-page long list of potential side effects.
Right.
So you don't want to be taking them unless you're absolutely benefiting.
Right. Absolutely. So, one of the things that I think is super important is a lot of people will say, my doctor will not order more tests. They will only order the TSH or maybe the T4.
Right. So 2 strategies that we've kind of come up with over the couple of years we've known each other is, first, if your doctor says, all I'm going to check is a TSH, or I'm going to send you to endocrinology, say the following. Okay, doctor, I'm afraid I have low thyroid. And I'm asking for these tests so that we can thoroughly evaluate my thyroid gland. Would you please document in your permanent medical record that I asked for these tests and you refuse to order them? Will you document that, please? And 8 out of 10 doctors, when you say that, very respectfully, are going to say, fine, what do you want me to order? And then they'll order the tests.
Right. And we will post a list of the tests so that you have it written down.
Yeah. But we'll post it over on the Ketonist on Facebook.
On Facebook, the Ketonist.
That's where it'll be. And that's the first strategy, is just say, please document that you refuse to thoroughly check my thyroid in the permanent medical record. And when you use those key words, immediately that doctor is going to start thinking about lawyers and courtrooms and depositions, and he's going to say, fine, what do you want me to order?
Right. And if your doctor still won't order the tests, there are labs that you can go to directly in 45 out of the 50 states.
Right. I know you cannot in New York. You know,
New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, and a couple other East Coasters.
So if you live in New York or New Jersey, you can just drive to another New England state. But if you're in Hawaii, I guess you're kind of screwed.
Next time you come to the contiguous states on your vacation,
when you come to California, so there are online lab corporations who you can say, hey, I want you to order these tests for me. They will send you an order. Then you take that order to a local LabCorp, Quest, or just you can take it actually to the local hospital. They will draw the blood and then ship it to them. You can get your results, and then you can either online consult with some of the doctors who do that, or then you can take that lab results to your doctor and say, look, dummy, I asked you to order these. You refused. Now look at my TPO antibody. It's sky high. I obviously have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and you refuse to order that. Now, what are we going to do to fix it? Or you can find a new doctor.
Or a new
It's
doctor.
up to you. Up to you.
Yeah. And one of the things that I see happening with people as well is that I think people should be educated about. TSH is probably the most variable of numbers, right?
It changes from minute to minute based on everything else that's going on in your body and in your metabolism. Also, as we were saying earlier, you can have a normal TSH and still have severe Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which will give you every single symptom that Kim just said and every other symptom of hypothyroid. If you Google that and read the list, it can give you every symptom, and replacing your thyroid hormone, even if your TSH is normal, absolutely is appropriate and absolutely will make you feel better.
Yeah. And so some doctors will, they'll like, okay, we'll give you some medication, but then they'll try to manage your medication with the TSH level, right. And that's really inappropriate, right?
Again, inappropriate. There's a pretty wide range of a normal TSH. And so I call this the Maserati end of normal, and I call this the Cavalier end of normal. They're both cars.
Yeah.
But if you had to pick, which one would you rather be? I'd rather be the Maserati, right? And so most docs will give you just enough thyroid replacement hormone to get you to the Cavalier level, and then say, that's it. I'm not going to raise your medicine anymore. I don't want you feeling like a Maserati. I'm just happy that you're a Cavalier. Most people would like to feel their best, and in order to do that, quite often you have to move the TSH down lower down to 1.0 or even 0.5. And
so for all of my numbers, other numbers, to look good, my TSH has to be below 0.5.
Right, which is going to freak many doctors out. If they don't understand how the thyroid truly functions, they'll say, oh, you're taking too much.
Right.
You're hyperthyroid. You're going to have a heart attack. But that's just not true at all. A doctor should always go by the patient's symptoms when it comes to hypothyroidism or thyroiditis. And indeed, before the TSH test was invented, that's what doctors went by. They would keep slowly increasing your dose until you said, hey, not I feel hyper, not I feel like I'm smoking crack. I feel normal. I feel like me again. Then that was your dose. That's how they did it.
If you overdose somebody on thyroid meds, how will they feel?
If I give someone enough thyroid replacement hormone to make them truly hyperthyroid, they feel miserable. Has anybody watching ever taken too much thyroid medicine? And it's not fun. It's not, and doctors, it's like they secretly think you're trying to get more because you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to feel
gain the system.
Yeah, trying to gain the system. But when you take too much thyroid hormone, you feel crummy. And so doctors, healthcare providers, nobody's wanting too much thyroid hormone.
It's not like opium.
Yeah, it's not like opium or crack. You don't feel great.
Yeah.
If you get a little more, you start to not feel good again if you take too much. And that's why doctors should treat to the patient's symptoms without making their free T3 and free T4 too high. But at the same time, you've got to honor the patient's symptoms and you've got to eliminate suffering. And would you not call hypothyroidism a special kind of suffering?
I really do. It makes you, the other thing I didn't talk about is it also makes you foggy headed.
Yes.
You can't think, you're like, I know I'm smarter than this.
Yep.
And you just can't fix it.
Yeah. I had one lady describe it to me like the Visine commercial. Like everything's fuzzy mentally. I just can't think straight. I can't see straight. But when we got our medicine right, she was like, it's like I'm clear now. My head is clear. My thinking is clear. And I thought that was a great way to explain it. So now you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, low thyroid.
Right.
Let's talk about the medications. What's the first medication most doctors are going to put you on?
Well, now this was not my experience. But if I were going to most mainstream, my doctor was a little woo-woo. If I went to a mainstream doctor, they would probably put me on Synthroid.
Synthroid or levothyroxine, which is fake T4.
Right.
It has synthetic in the name, Synthroid. It's fake T4. And so it is a patented molecule, which means it's not exactly like the T4 molecule. It fits in the receptor fairly well, but it does not fit perfectly like a molecule of T4 would. And so it's much, much better to go back to your doctor and say, yeah, no, this is what they all recommend, but could you put me on a natural desiccated thyroid product? And the names of those are?
There's Throid.
Yep.
There's NP, which I think is different.
Yep, NP's a little different.
There's Armour Thyroid.
Yep, and there's WP. And then in Canada, there's IRFA. And there may be other names in Europe or the UK, I'm not sure. But even though each one of the different brand names of desiccated thyroid is a little different, it's basically the packing and the preservatives, that's what's different. The hormone molecule is exactly T4, which is what you need, but they also contain T3.
Right, because it's natural desiccated. It's from an animal. It's a thyroid gland, right?
Yeah.
And so one of what we didn't mention is, so T4 is kind of the main thyroid hormone,
That's what your thyroid makes.
Right.
Yeah, and stores.
But it's not what your body uses.
Right.
So for your body to use the thyroid hormone, the T4 has to be converted to T3.
Right. And that can be a problem for some people.
Right.
They can have a conversion problem. And so if you're just giving them fake T4, you're not helping them at all because they can't convert real T4 into T3, much less fake T4 into T3. And that's why the desiccated thyroid hormones are really awesome because you're getting real T4 and real T3. And so you're bypassing any conversion problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just, it's just like any supplement. If you're low in B12, right? And your body isn't very good at getting B12 from your food, then if you supplement a B12 shot, you're bypassing whatever's going wrong in that first
Exactly.
In that pathway.
And if that's a synthetic B12 that has to be converted into real B12, and you don't convert well, you're still deficient in B12. That's exactly right. A common myth that you'll hear a lot of doctors repeat, I used to say it back in 2003 before I knew better, is that Armour or Nature, the desiccated thyroid hormone replacements are unpredictable. They're not pure. The consistency's not right. It's absolutely untrue. That's a myth that Synthroid, the company, when they came out with Synthroid, they put that myth out there and they gave away a ton of free samples of Synthroid. And so all doctors jumped on that train. And Nature and Armour are tested constantly for consistency. They're sent to independent third labs, and I don't make any money off these desiccated thyroid hormones. I just know they're the best because I've used them in hundreds and hundreds of patients.
Right. It's sort of like when they came out with formula, the formula companies said stop breastfeeding because the natural thing is not as good.
Yeah, it's archaic, and your grandmother did it. It's not fashionable. Breast milk is 1,000 times better than formula, and desiccated thyroid is 1,000 times better than fake T4.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you can imagine, though, if you're taking Synthroid and the only things your doctor will check is a TSH and a T4,
right.
You've got plenty of T4.
Sure,
So
looks great.
You can't convert it.
Your T3 can be in the tank.
Right.
And your doctor has no idea because he or she did not check your free T3. And that's why you need this complete panel that we're going to post over on The Ketonist on Facebook as soon as this live's over.
Right. And so a lot of you are going to deal with doctors that just kind of refuse. And my first thing is that sucks.
Yeah.
What are some options?
Well, you can teach your doctor with the little trick that we talked about earlier, or you can find a new doctor. I like it when people teach their doctor, and because you really want a good working relationship with your doctor, who you should look at as a learned health partner, not your doctor daddy or your medical mama. That's not what your doctor is. Your doctor is a learned health partner. If your mechanic said, oh, you need a new motor and a new transmission, would you just write a check or would you get a second opinion? I'd get a second opinion. And so doctors should never be offended if somebody does that because this is your one life. That was your teenage years that you lost.
Yeah, that was like 20 years of my life that went really kind of crappily that could have gone a lot better.
Yeah, because you didn't get the right second opinion.
Right.
Yeah. And so you gotta work with your doctor. And if you cannot work with your doctor, if they want to be your doctor daddy and don't want to be your partner, you gotta find a new doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it goes.
You want to take some questions?
Sure, I've got some questions.
All right, guys. Type your question in again if you've already typed it because they're going by pretty fast.
Someone is on Armour and she finds 60 milligrams. Is it milligrams?
Yeah, milligrams.
Is too little. And 90 is too much. And those are the two dosages that she can find. What do you do if you're between them?
You can alternate 60-90, 60-90 on alternate days or...
Good dog.
Hey, shh. Hey, shh. Come on. We're live here. What are you doing? Calm down, Otter. Morgan, Barry, come get your dog. Okay, what was the question? Oh, okay. So, or you can get a 30 and break it in half, and then take a 60 and half of a 30, which would give you 75, right?
No, that would be 9. Oh, half. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. And so there's multiple ways to do that. Or a lot of people, when they go up on a dose, they'll just take it for a day or two. And it feels like too much. You really need to give it 2 weeks. And then in 2 weeks, if you're still having the flutters and the anxiety and just hyper, then it's too much. But most people, when you go from 60 to 90, they'll have a day or two of that anxiousness and that fluttering and the palpitations. Then it goes away. Then they feel better. And so if you didn't try the 90 for 2 weeks, I would go back and try that again. But 75 milligrams may be the dose for you.
Yeah. And so I'm on, what am I on? 120? Mm-hmm. I'm on a fairly high dose of the Nature Throid that I take. And it's what I need to feel pretty normal.
And I'll tell you this too. A lot of doctors, if you do talk them into switching you from Synthroid or levothyroxine over to the natural desiccated, they're going to lowball you because they're not used to prescribing that medication. And so there's a conversion chart. If you're on 100 of Synthroid, you should be on this much Armour or Nature. The doc may not look that chart up and may not know that conversion. And so you might wind up being put on 30 of armor or nature. And that's not nearly enough. You need way more than that. And so then you'll go back in a month and say, I feel like crap. This is not helping at all. And he'll be like, well, okay, there you go. You need to be back on Synthroid. But you never took the appropriate dose of the desiccated thyroid.
Right. Oh, one thing we didn't say. We're not your doctor.
That's right. I am a doctor, but I'm not your doctor this evening. So none of this is medical advice. I want you to go and have a discussion with your doctor armed with this knowledge and with Kim Howerton's experience, her life experience, that I don't want you or your son or daughter or your neighbor's son or daughter to suffer through. I want you guys to get diagnosed as quickly as you possibly can.
Right. So another question came in that every single one of the medications they've tried, they seem to get leg spasms. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, you might, and that can be a sign of hyperthyroidism. And so I would give it a 2-week try before you judge it, because you might have muscle spasms or cramps. You might have just racing thoughts. You might have palpitations for the first day or 2 or 3 that you're on the new dosage or the new medication. But I would give it a full 14, if not 21 days of a trial before you say, no, I can't take that.
Right.
Because very often your body's not used to that.
No.
And I bet if you could think back accurately, the first day or 2 you were on the medicine I bet you were like, whoa, this is almost too much. I don't know. But your body's going to get used to it if it is the proper dose for you.
Right. So somebody just asked, can these meds cause heat intolerance? One thing I will say is hypothyroid people are always cold.
Yes. And so if you've had the thermostat set on 72 your entire life because you were hypothyroid, then when you are no longer hypothyroid, 72 is going to be too hot. And some people will describe that as having a heat intolerance. That just means you need to lower your thermostat back down to 68 where it should be. That's not a heat intolerance. But you will feel heat, whereas before you did it, because you were always cold.
Right.
You were the one wearing a sweater in the summer.
Right. If you are in an office building, it's a rough life with hypothyroidism.
Yes,
You keep those things chilly.
Absolutely.
Some people have asked, and it's not what we're talking about specifically tonight, but briefly, what is hyperthyroidism?
So hyperthyroidism is when your thyroid hormone is making too much thyroid hormone. The thyroid gland is called the master gland for a reason. It is in charge of everything. Every cell in your body has a T3 receptor. And so if you're making too much thyroid hormone or taking too much, you feel miserable. You can have fatigue. You can have a lot of unwanted weight loss. You can lose muscle mass. You can lose bone density for sure and develop osteoporosis. And so it can sometimes be caused by a tumor. Or it can just be caused by an overactive thyroid gland. But hyperthyroidism, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. But I will say that a lot of people with hyperthyroidism eventually end up hypo.
Absolutely, because very often with Hashimoto's, you'll be hyper. Remember when Kim said she was up, then she was down? And if you checked her in that up state, she might well look hyperthyroid because of the thyroiditis is causing her thyroid to burn hot. But she didn't truly have hyperthyroid. She really had Hashimoto's.
Right. So one of the questions that's come in, by the way, I'm trying to answer the questions, but there might be some that pass us by, so I apologize. Can you control this with diet?
You can probably slow down the progression and lessen the severity with a proper human diet. But I have not seen any cases where somebody completely reversed their hypothyroidism once it was diagnosed with diet alone. Now, if you were in the earliest stages of Hashimoto's and you caught it and you switched from eating the crap standard American diet to some part of the spectrum of the proper human diet, you could probably quiet down your immune system. It would stop attacking your thyroid, and your thyroid would continue to function normally or return to normal function. So if we had caught you at 10 or 11 years of age and said, oh crap, she's got Hashimoto's, stop eating the honey buns and put you on a true proper human diet, you might not have to take thyroid replacement today. But after you've been hypothyroid for years, you might be able to take a lower dose, but you probably won't ever be able to not need any thyroid replacement.
Like a lot of health issues, if you look at it, right, like if you have diabetes and you go keto, you can, if you have type 2, you can turn that around and then you won't have the kidney damage eventually.
Right, exactly.
But if you had type 2 diabetes and your kidneys are damaged and then you start eating keto, you have damaged kidneys.
Yeah, most of that damage is permanent. And same goes for fatty liver. If it goes for too long, you've got some degree of permanent liver damage. And so that, I think that's a great analogy. Yeah. After a certain point of damage, the thyroid is compromised and it cannot give you the amount of thyroid hormone that you need.
Right. And then there's a lot of medicine shame, I feel like. Like, people don't want to take medication. I get it. I hate taking pills. I don't want to take like a ton of supplements because I hate taking pills. And other reasons. But, I have to say, for me, I never resent my thyroid hormone because I know how much better I feel when I take it. And I know that there have been a few times over the past few years where I went away and forgot it, or I didn't get my dose renewed, or, and I kind of was like, maybe I'm okay now. And bad news.
Thyroid replacement hormone is not a medication. You shouldn't think of it that way. Just like water is not a medication. Yeah. Food is not a medication. Air is not a medication. You need those things to properly function as a human. If your thyroid is not making enough thyroid hormone, you need that. And so you can think of it as a thyroid supplement or as air, water, and breath. You need that in order to function properly. That is not just a medication you take.
Yeah. So, I just want to if you feel a stigma about it, don't.
Yeah, don't. It's not like you're taking a pill. You're taking a needed replacement for thyroid or for hormones that your thyroid no longer makes.
Right. Okay. I'm looking at questions. We've got some people saying, they're still on meds, but they feel a ton better. Someone says this is not a diagnosis in this moment, just going to say, but somebody has a 571 on their thyroid globulin antibody.
Yeah, so whoever that is, you absolutely have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay. Go see your doctor and make sure that you're treated for that diagnosis. Now, obviously, this is not medical advice, but I want you to go have a conversation with your doctor and arm yourself with knowledge. Do some research about thyroiditis. Do some research about your TPO antibody and what that means if that's elevated.
Yeah. Someone had asked, can thyroid affect your blood pressure?
100%, yeah. The thyroid is the master gland. It can affect the function of every organ in your body, every tissue in your body, every cell in your body. And so many, many things get better when you get your thyroid function optimized with the proper amount of thyroid replacement hormone.
Right. Some people are saying they're actually hot. They're just they have hypo, but they're hot. Just some people are different.
If you're over the age of 40, then we may be thinking about hormones. We may be thinking about a hormone change that's not related to the thyroid.
Some people mention, and this is absolutely true. If your thyroid is off, your cholesterol numbers may be wonky.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a funny story. When I was first starting my medical practice, I actually had a machine in my lab that would check a lipid panel.
Okay.
And I was looking at all the codes of how insurance would pay for a lipid panel because I wanted to order as many as I could because I had a machine. I wanted to make my $2 or whatever I made off each test. And hypothyroidism was one of the diagnoses that would pay for a lipid panel. And this was back in probably 2002, 2003. And I was like, why? What does that matter? And I had not been taught that hypothyroidism can elevate your total cholesterol and your LDL levels. That's 100% true. But I didn't know it at that time. That's why they call medicine practice. And so I'll tell my own self, I did not know that there was a connection between the two when I first started practicing medicine.
Yeah. So there's absolutely, some doctors will check your thyroid when your cholesterol is high.
And vice versa. Yeah. And that's a sign that doctor knows about that.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Right. Some people have asked about iodine. So how does iodine relate to thyroid?
Yes. Iodine is an element, iodide, right? It is something that is vital to the human body. If I were able to magically reach into your body and pull out every atom of iodine, you would be dead within minutes. Okay. Iodine is an essential mineral that all human beings have to have. Whether you're hypothyroid, hyperthyroid, or normal euthyroid, you have to have iodine for the proper function of every single cell, tissue, and organ in your body. A lot of doctors don't know this. I didn't used to know this. And every cell in your body, your muscle cells, the cells in the lining of your bladder, the cells in your brain, they all have a little receptor on them called a sodium iodide symporter. And so it will give up some sodium to pull in an iodine, and that takes an ATP.
Okay.
Which is the currency of energy in your body. And your body never wastes energy unless it's important. And so that sodium iodide symporter would not be on every cell in your body if that cell did not need iodine inside of the cell membrane. And so you hear a lot of people say, oh, if you're hypothyroid, you're Hashimoto's, you don't need any iodine. Absolutely false. If you're a human, if you're a mammal actually, even if you're a dog or a cat, you need iodine in a certain amount. And the American diet, most of the foods that we eat in the modern world are super deficient in iodine. And so many people benefit greatly from an iodine supplement.
Right. Now, if you're somebody that lives near the coast and you eat a lot of seafood,
you don't need it.
You're probably okay.
You're getting enough iodine.
Yeah.
But if you live inland and you don't eat much seafood, then it's almost certain that you need more iodine in your diet. And you can get that by eating more seafood or by taking a little iodine supplement. And you definitely can take too much iodine. There's no doubt about that. But there's no point in taking too much. Just take a little bit, and that's what you need.
Right. Some people have been talking about something called, that I've never heard of, a thyroid storm.
Yeah, and that Hashimoto's can lead to that. And that's basically all the signs of hyperthyroid all at one time.
Okay.
And it's very miserable. I've had a couple of patients when I was training in Memphis, and it's a terrible thing. You can actually take way too much thyroid replacement and have a thyroid storm.
So it's just like a deluge of thyroid.
Exactly right. Yeah. And it's not good at all. Also, if you have a tumor that secretes the thyroid hormones, or you have a brain tumor in the pituitary that makes you secrete too much TSH, you can have thyroid storm symptoms.
Okay. All right. Someone says, is reverse T3 okay at 29?
It depends on your reference lab.
Okay.
As long as your reverse T3 is within the normal range, that's probably fine.
Okay. So one of the things to really look at is a lot of this is nuance, right? It's like, is this too high? Well, I can't tell you unless we look at all the other things in association.
You can't look at just one thing and understand the thyroid. And you also absolutely cannot ever understand a patient's thyroid if you don't listen to their symptoms and how their symptoms change with the different treatments. And so many doctors just want to change your dose, then check your labs. And they don't really want to hear from you. Completely inappropriate. If your symptoms are not where they should be, you're not on enough hormone replacement.
And another thing that I didn't say earlier that I wanted to say now is the thyroid ranges have changed over time. So when I was first experiencing problems, the range of what was okay was much wider.
Yeah. It used to be okay if your TSH was under 10. That was considered normal. Then they tightened it up and said, oh, it's got to be under 5 for it to be normal. And now most reference labs will say it's got to be under 3.5 to be within normal limits. But many of the older doctors remember, and so if you have a TSH of 4.5 or 5, even though it's bolded on the lab results as abnormal, they may say, oh, that's fine. My professor taught me that's fine. Don't worry about that. Absolutely not. You absolutely want your TSH to be at least less than 3, if not even lower than that.
Right. And so what was the range when your doctor went to medical school is no longer the range, and the current range is probably wrong as well.
It's probably still too broad.
Yeah.
And I try to keep women's TSH about 1.0. That's where they seem to feel the best. And so you cannot ignore your patient's symptoms and treat thyroid properly.
Right. So someone just asked, what are the symptoms of hypothyroidism?
Of hypo?
Yeah, I think so.
of hypo?
I don't have my glasses
let's name
on.
off everyone we can think.
No. What are the symptoms of thyroid problems is what they said. So
number one is fatigue, right? And let's just focus on hypo or low thyroid because that's what this talk is about. So fatigue is really close to number one. Almost everybody's going to have fatigue. I just have no energy. I give out before I'm finished. I feel like I can't keep up with my peers.
Right.
They're running and playing and I just want to lay down.
Right. There are bookish children, and I definitely like to read, but like every recess I was reading, not playing.
Yeah.
Because that was the kind of the level of energy I had.
Yeah. And as a teenager, that might be okay, but at 9 or 10, that is not okay.
Yeah.
Come over here and make that face, Neisha. Loves it.
Oh.
Come over here and make that face.
Say hey, because Neisha also has a thyroid story that she has shared many times, but there's Neisha.
This is my sweet, loving wife, Neisha. Her handle on everything is Neisha loves it, right?
Neisha does not love hypothyroidism.
No. You were diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey, but you're pretty.
I had it way before then, but I was diagnosed 4 years ago.
Yeah. How many years do you think you had it before you were
At least
diagnosed?
2.
Least
Because
2.
it was before I met you and then during RN school.
Yeah.
And then after, 3.
Yeah, 3
Yeah.
years. Yeah. That's a long time to suffer when you didn't have to suffer if somebody had just checked.
Yeah. I was just depressed,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yeah.
Just
And
depressed.
it was depressed and,
You were prescribed an
it's normal to
antidepressant,
be-
weren't
yeah.
you? Yeah.
It's normal to be that tired.
Yeah. You're busy. It's normal to be that tired.
Yeah.
That's not okay. I think anytime a healthcare provider says that, unless you've got triplets and you're completing your PhD and you work 2 jobs, it's probably not okay to be as tired as you're feeling.
And still you should be functional.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I mean, okay, so
was
you
not-
guys have a very small baby.
Yes.
So let's discuss how tired you felt with Hashi's
much more time
compared to a newborn in the house.
Much more.
And you're working full time as a social on your social media,
managing
my stuff, and then
and
you've got a
working on
newborn
my stuff
baby,
too.
and still you're not as tired now.
No, I'm like 1% as tired as I was. I'm not in the screen.
There you go.
As I was.
That's Hashimoto's, and that's hypothyroidism. Yeah. So what are the? You guys have experienced it. Now come back here. You guys have
symptoms. So
what are the symptoms?
We talk exhaustion, depression,
brain fog,
irritability,
anxiety.
There's also
infertility.
Infertility.
Bloating or weight gain of the fat variety.
Yeah.
And it's usually in the abdominal area.
Chronic constipation is a very common one that a lot of people don't want to talk about that because it involves poop.
I had migraines all the time too.
Yeah. You can have migraines.
Dry skin.
Yep. Dry,
You're freezing.
scaly.
I was bald.
Your hair falls out.
I had no hair. And I have normally thick hair and I could see my scalp.
Yeah. Another one is you're chronically cold. And so I used to ask women, if there's 50 people in a room, are you the one saying, damn, it's cold in here, or damn, it's hot in here? And everyone with hypothyroid says, I'm the one just like, please turn off the thermostat. Yeah. Now, and let me say this, you don't have to have every single one of these symptoms to have hypothyroid. You can have just, because we're all unique snowflakes, right? You can just have a few and you still have the diagnosis.
And I had pain. Did you have
just
any?
achy.
Yeah.
Achy.
Yeah. No, everything, you feel old.
I did. I felt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
You used to say that. Like, I don't understand.
I was
I'm
I'm too young to feel this damn old.
Yeah.
Isn't there a song?
There's a song.
And so it'll start with your head hair if it's a hair thing. But if it keeps progressing, the outer third of your eyebrows, and then eventually your eyelashes.
Yep, that's
I never got that bad with my hair issues.
Yeah.
But
She has 4 times the amount of hair of a normal human, so she was starting from a higher place.
Yeah, and I still was bald, like my head, but my eyebrows.
Your hairdresser said something about it.
No, I did. I had a little Cavalier with sunroof, and I had the sunroof open, and the sun was shining in, and I was like, I can see my scalp. That's never happened to me before. That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
My hairdresser at one point said that he diagnoses a lot of hypothyroidism because he's like, your hair is falling out to a lot of people.
Absolutely. So if your hairdresser has said that, go and get the complete lab panel of tests that they're going to be posted on the Ketonist on Facebook when we're done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Get some ice out of the thing.
Yeah, get some
ice. We're about to wrap this up.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to look. Nora says, my daughter has all of these symptoms, but falls on the low end of normal.
Mm-hmm. Now, it is absolutely appropriate for a doctor, if somebody has every single one of these symptoms and is on the cavalier end of normal with regard to labs instead of the Maserati end. I've treated well over 100 patients with thyroid replacement hormone, even though their TSH was within normal limits. That is not in any way inappropriate whatsoever, because like I said earlier, first and foremost, you honor the patient's symptoms. How do they feel? Do you feel normal? And so you may have to find a doctor who understands the thyroid in order to get your daughter treated. A great resource for this, there's two. First of all, go to a website called Stop the Thyroid Madness. It's type it in all one word, and there's a list of doctors who understand this, and there are definitely U.S. and Canadian doctors on that list. Also, if you'll go to my YouTube channel and type in how to find a low-carb doctor, any doctor who understands low-carb or keto or carnivore is gonna more than likely be able to understand the thyroid, because they're thinking outside the box, or they wouldn't be recommending that diet. And so those two resources are a great place to find a doctor who understands how to properly treat a thyroid. A third way is to go to your local compounding pharmacy.
Oh, right.
This will not be Walmart, Walgreens, CVS. This will be a locally owned pharmacy that's got the mortar and pestle on it. And that means they still make medicine the old-fashioned way. And a lot of doctors who understand how to treat a thyroid will use compounded medicine. And if you'll ask that pharmacist, who is the doctor in town that prescribes Armour or Nature Thyroid, or in Canada, IRFA, the pharmacist will say, oh, that's Dr. So-and-so down over on 3rd Street. Go see Dr. So-and-so. Dr. So-and-so will treat your symptoms and not just your numbers.
Right. So Angel had just asked about a lab course that we do.
Yes.
So, and finding out about it. So Dr. Berry and I do a course where we talk about all sorts of labs, including thyroid and other things.
Not just thyroid. We
right.
talk about
all
kind
sorts.
of the full spectrum of labs that you need to know that you're truly healthy and truly on the right track.
Right. And so you can find out more information I'm going to post it at the Ketonist, the link, but it's commonsenselabscourse.com. So if you want to look at that, you can.
Yeah, perfect. And we're going to be having a new course
in March.
In March.
Which
okay,
is
perfect.
Starting soon.
So check out the Ketonist on Facebook and you'll find the link, or you can go to commonsenselabscourse.com. Like it.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay, good. Let's do one more good question.
One more good question. Okay. Thoughts on LDN to bring down antibodies? I don't even know what that is.
Low dose naltrexone.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, some people taking low dose naltrexone therapy really helps to calm their immune system. But before I even did that, and low dose naltrexone is pretty darn safe, but before I did that, I would fix my diet and I would fix my lifestyle. And if you're not eating on the spectrum that I call the proper human diet, you need to stop eating all sugar, stop eating all grains, stop all industrial seed oils, and start eating lots of fatty meat. Okay? And then look into the keto diet. And I don't mean keto products. I mean real whole ketogenic foods. Eat that diet. And very often that will calm down your immune system and it will stop inappropriately attacking your body. But if you're already doing that and you still have some autoimmune issues, then low dose naltrexone may be exactly what you need.
Right. So, one thing that I wanted to mention, is that I totally forgot because we're doing multiple cameras. So, is that, if your diet is not in order, your thyroid is going to continue to be unhappy,
yep.
and it's going to be really hard to dial in that medication yep. amount.
Absolutely.
And so you have to have a good foundation.
Yes. And your diet is the foundation upon which your entire health is built.
Right. Right. And so, lastly, when you OD on thyroid meds, right?
Yeah.
If you take too much thyroid, you'll get the symptoms of hyperthyroidism.
Yes.
But are you going to give yourself hyperthyroidism?
No. And so let's say you go to the doctor and you're taking 120.
Okay.
And you're like, I don't know. I don't think that's enough. And your doc bumps you up to 150.
Yeah.
And for the next 2 weeks, you try it. Give it a 2-week trial.
Yeah.
And every day you're having palpitations, your heart's beating fast, you're anxious, you're irritable, you can't sleep, you've got diarrhea. Those are hyperthyroid symptoms. If they're not gone in 2 weeks, then you're taking too much thyroid medication or thyroid replacement hormone. Let's call it that, not medication. And you are technically at that point hyperthyroid. But that's not permanent. All you have to do is go back to the doc and say, hey, I think that's too much. After 2 weeks, I'm still having hyperthyroid symptoms. Your doc lowers it back down. The hyperthyroid goes away.
Right. It's just
temporary.
It's temporary. You're not going to give yourself unfixable hyperthyroidism.
Exactly right. And it seems like a lot of docs are afraid of that. Like, oh, if I give you too much, you'll have hyperthyroid. No, you'll just have hyperthyroid symptoms until we get the dose right.
Right.
Yeah.
So somebody has just said that all of her labs came back, quote unquote, beautiful, according to her doctor.
Right.
And she has all the same symptoms I do.
Yeah. And so for one doctor, beautiful can mean a very different thing than for another doctor. And so you might want to go for a second opinion, go to your compounding pharmacy and ask which doctors prescribe Nature and IRFA and Armor, and go see that doctor one time with your labs. Or you might want to do our lab course, and because we can actually answer questions like that. We're still not giving medical advice, but we can go over labs and kind of say, hey, this, that, and the other. But there's multiple resources for you. You can't just, if you're having every symptom, then you have a hormone problem, more than likely thyroid hormone.
Now, it might be something
But it could be another hormone. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why you need the complete panel of labs that we talk about in our lab course, so that you know, oh, it's not an adrenal issue. Oh, it's not a gender hormone issue. Oh, it's not a pituitary gland issue. You need all these labs to know that for sure.
Okay. Last question. Have you heard of keto blocking your thyroid hormone replacement from working?
Yeah, there's no truth to that whatsoever. I heard one keto guru saying that, or not a keto, they were paleo, and they were saying, oh, keto can block and call it. No, it's absolutely false. Not true at all. Keto is a proper human diet. It absolutely is one of the diets that you can consider completely appropriate to eat as a human being. It's not going to block anything except your ability to store too much fat.
Right. One of the things, though, I remembered what I wanted to say. One of the things that can happen is you can exacerbate hypothyroidism if you're chronically under eating.
Exactly. If you're portion restricting and calorie restricting and not eating enough food and enough protein, you can absolutely make your hypothyroid worse or bring on symptoms of fatigue and hair loss and other things because you're not eating enough protein, or you're just not eating enough food in general because you remember what your mom taught you, that if you're trying to slim, you need to eat like a bird.
Yeah.
And that's not what you have to do on a keto diet. You get to eat until you're comfortably full.
Right. And so I think sometimes you hear people saying hypothyroid, keto is bad for hypo, it's actually that chronically dieting and under eating, which sometimes people get confused with keto, is what's damaging.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on Keto Life Support. If you'd like more, you can join our friendly Facebook group, Keto Life Support. Can't find it? Go to ketolifesupport.com. If you ever want to suggest a topic for discussion, that would be the place to do it. We'd really, really appreciate it if you would go to your podcast app and subscribe, because that's awesome. And what would be super awesome is if you'd be so kind as to write a review for us. Though we would love it if that review was awesome, just writing a review is all we ask. So have a fabulous keto week, and we'll see you next time.